Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Aspiring Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Hamza Chowdhury, and welcome to our series on stocks. This is episode 2, and today I'd like to just kind of go over the Thinkorswim overview of the platform. It is a very popular platform for retail traders, and I figured it'd be a good time to kind of go over it in a little more detail and talk about generally the market and what we're seeing and what we're doing. And let me know if you have any questions, and feel free to like and subscribe to the channel and help support and grow. That's all I'd ask. We're not a channel that sells you anything, so anything you can do to help us grow the channel by liking, subscribing, sharing with your friends and family, that's all I personally would like to ask. So let's get started. So if we look here on the Thinkorswim platform, we have essentially a series of charts. So I have 4 charts open, each with different time frames. And when I say time frames, what I'm referring to is the time that I'm looking at for a specific chart or for a stock. So for example, on this time frame, I'm looking at the stock's behavior every day. So it's a daily time frame. So each of these, what we call candles, represents one day for a stock. So for example, right now I'm looking at mRNA, which some of you guys may have heard of, is the sort of the vaccine leader in the stock market. It's called Moderna. And each one of these candles represents how the stock performed on a specific day. So, for example, you may notice back here on the 17th of July, the stock actually hit $95.21 at an all-time high, but it actually started over here closer to a low of 82.61. So that's a $13 range, which is pretty significant for a stock. And the reason why I wanted to sort of share this platform with you is to show kind of like my setup and what I sort of find that works for me. Everybody's different, so if you have a setup that works for you, good for you. I just wanted to kind of go over it and show you guys the platform and what it can do for you if you decide to get into trading. So watch list is extremely important just to know what you're looking at. These are some of the symbols that I've been sort of watching. You can see that some stocks go up 50, 60, hundreds of percent in the day. Some lose. Intel just reported some terrible earnings, so they had a pretty bad day on Friday, and they dropped pretty significantly. So you can see that there's this major gap between where they closed on Thursday and where they opened on Friday. So one of the things I encourage you to do is, depending on what kind of sector you're looking for right now, because of COVID, sort of part 2, those stocks are starting to get popular again. But whatever stocks you're interested in, whatever companies you're interested in, I encourage you, when you are in the platform, create a watch list. And if you ever need to sort of edit your watch list, you can come over here. You can click, and I have a handful of my personal watch list that I have here, but you can actually come here and go to edit. Okay, so any list that you've created and you need to change them, you can come in here to edit, and you can see I have an airlines, I have some daily ones and some favorites. So let's just say I go to my Hamza favorites. So these are some of my favorite stocks that I like to watch. So Overstock's been extremely bullish. My first purchase on it 2 months ago was around like $11 or $12, and it just it's hit over $50. So it's been extremely bullish. A lot of people buying stuff online, so that's been the trend. It's a lot of these trendy stocks. Gilead's been kind of in a tight range in the 70s and 80s, but it's a fun stock to watch. A lot of these stocks are stocks that you may have heard of. And again, just create your own. Add whatever symbols you like. If you're not sure, you can look them up on Google as well. And you can always constantly update this. So these are, again, stocks that I personally am interested in, that I like to trade, or I like to watch, but that honestly changes every day. Typically, what I like to do is I like to focus on maybe 1 to 3, no more than like 5 stocks in a day. The more you sort of have to watch and trade, the more likelihood there is to make a mistake. So try to keep lists that your watch list can be as long as you want, but try to keep stocks that you're trading to a minimal, so that way you're 100% focused on it. And again, I'm talking about the day trader. I'm not talking about someone who's just investing long term in some of these stocks. So this video in the series is more for someone who's day trading these stocks, right? So you're in and out within the same day. A lot of these stocks have been movers during this pandemic. Again, back to mRNA. So once you have that and you can sort of save that, you can have your watch list. Now, one of the things that surprises me and I mentioned this before, is that a lot of people don't pay attention to what we call the level two. And what the level two is, again, is it's going to tell you who's in the marketplace, what they're buying, how much they're buying, what the size is, and it helps you understand exactly what the interest level is, right? And what the spread is. So for example, on the bid side, somebody wants to buy Intel at $50.85, and at the same time somebody's selling it for $50.87, which means there's a 2-cent spread between what someone's willing to buy it for and what someone's selling it for. But what's also important here is look at the bid size, right? So this person only has one, which stands for about 100 shares, and the person who's asking actually is going to dump 23, which is each number represents 100 shares, so it'd be 2,300 shares. So you have someone who's selling 2,300 shares and someone who wants to buy 100. So understanding this sort of imbalance between the buyers and the sellers of a stock is really important to know. Is this something that people are trying to get rid of and dump, like in Intel on a Friday where everybody was just trying to get rid of it, right? And the price and the value of the stock went down because they reported that they were not going to be able to meet the manufacturer of the chips. So it's really important to read and understand the level two to know exactly who's coming, who's buying, who's selling, what's that spread look like. Okay, so this is probably the most important tool that I use in trading. Then I have a quick chart here for the SPY. So again, just as a disclaimer, I use this now as a charting tool on this platform. I used to trade off of it, and recently I switched brokers. Great charting tools in Thinkorswim, so that's why we're going over it. I encourage you, if you haven't tried it already, to sort of go through it and get familiar with it. But I have a chart here for the SPY, and again, this follows the S&P index. So this lets me know the general trend of the S&P. So for example, if you see that it's going down, then I tend to be a little more bearish on the stocks I trade. I might be interested in shorting more stocks. Depending on what you're trading, you want to generally go with what the market's telling you. That's what I love about day trading. It's not something where you're trying to fight the market. You kind of go with what the market gives you, and you're always going to be cash at the end of the day. So if the market crashes tomorrow, it doesn't affect you because you're cash at the end of the day. And if you want to follow the market, which let's say you're in a downtrend in market, then you can be, bearish on a stock that you're trading. So having this chart and understanding how the market's doing is a great tool. And then one of the most important things that definitely people overlook is the news. The news is what drives as a catalyst stocks, whether in the upward or downward position. So if you're like, should I be investing in a stock? More than likely, it's the news that's going to get the investor's intention, right? So if it's something like, like for a pharmaceutical company that's come up with a new drug that got a FDA approval, that news is going to lead that stock to skyrocket immediately. So you really want to have and pay attention to news. Again, this is built in within the platform. You can go here to add, and you can actually add some of these gadgets. So we talked about the live news. We talked about the level 2. We also talked about the watch list. So these are some of the things that you can actually add. And every time you click on a stock, you may notice that my news is changing and my stocks are changing. Why is that? Because in Thinkorswim, they're all tied together with this sort of color coding. So for example, here I have that this watch list is red, right? And I also have the news, I've selected red as the same color. So what does that mean? It means that every time I select a stock in this watch list, that the news for that stock is going to automatically update. So if I change this to example for yellow, right, a different color, I've now unlinked this watch list to this news. So if I click on any of these items, I'm not going to get an updated news. Okay, so that's another cool thing about this is you can actually link your news and get instant news on any stock that you're watching. And then of course the same thing with these charts is notice that I have the same color from my watch list on each of these charts, so that whenever I click on a stock, all of these charts get updated with the stock that I'm looking at with the different time frames. So for example, we said that this was the daily time frame. The chart right here I have on the right is actually a 1-minute time frame, and the chart here is a 5-minute time frame, and the chart here is actually a 20-minute time frame. And most people would say, well, why does that matter? Because again, as a day trader, we're looking at very small, short time frames to understand the behavior of a stock. Again, if you're an investor, and for example, let's go back to Moderna, right? You might have invested 1 or 2 months ago, and you're just sort of watching this thing, sort of come up and come down. and then of course it made the big move, and now it's come back down and it's hitting certain levels. So when we're looking at it from a day time frame, we're actually looking at it from a 1 minute perspective, a 5 minute perspective, and a 20-minute perspective to kind of gather the movements of the stock. And what we do in trading is we use these technical indicators, different ones, whether it's what we call the RSI, the Bollinger Bands, which are these yellow bands here, the pivot points, which you can see are these dashed lines. I do use pivots. On this chart here, you can see the yellow and white lines represent the lows and the highs of a specific day. And then you can also see that I have another line here that represents a simple moving average. So there's different and honestly hundreds of thousands of indicators that people use. The one that I'd like to share, at least a couple that I'd like to share today that I think could be really beneficial to your trading. And again, so this is a 1 minute time frame on Thinkorswim. So if you click here, it's just a 1 minute time frame with a 30-day aggregate. Is basically this idea that what we call the V-Wap. Okay, so the V-Wap is a line. So if you click here, okay, the V-Wap is a study that's already built in to Thinkorswim and most platforms. It's probably the most useful technical indicator that I've seen. Now, why is that? It basically says that imagine you buy 10,000 shares of a stock for $20 and somebody buys 100 of that same stock for $5. Well, the average would be 5 between 20, right, which would be about what, 12 and a half. And that isn't fair because if someone bought it for 20,000 shares at $20, the value of the stock is actually weighted a lot more closer to the 20 than it is to the 5. The person who bought it at the 5 could have just been manipulating the stock by selling it at a lower price, right, and buying it. And that's what a lot of people tend to do on the pre-market and the post-market, which again, we could talk in a different video. So when we talk about what we call the V-Wap, which you'll hear, it stands for the volume weighted average price. So it depends on, it's calculated based on how much volume was it sold at a certain price, and that's the line that is very well respected in trading. So a lot of times, if you look at a stock, for example, on this 1 minute time frame, and you may notice that the stock is trading above that purple line, that means it's a bullish trend. So when it's trading above this purple line, this tends to be a bullish trend. And a lot of times, this is when people are going long on a stock. So they're expecting the stock to go up and rise. Now, when it falls below the line, okay, which let's go back a little bit to the day before, right? We can see that the VWAP line was up here and the stock was trading below the line. So again, in day trading, we're looking at it per day. So on Thursday, the stock was definitely bearish, which means people were expecting it to sort of trade in a downward direction. Okay, now the stock has gotten beaten up, as we can see in the daily time frame, from 95 all the way down to the 70s in a matter of a few days. So it's been beaten up pretty badly. Okay, so this VWAP line is a line to kind of give us a general direction and understanding of the stock. Are people buying it and investing in it, or are they selling it off? And if so, what should we do? So again, is it a stock to buy or is it a stock to sell? That's what we're looking at when we're looking at the VWAP line. And another thing too you'll find is that the stock tends to respect that line. So for example, when the stock, let's just go ahead and zoom in here. So when the stock, for example, breaks this line and goes into, this is when people will tend to buy into a stock and not sell it off, right? They want to long, what we call long the stock. They want to invest in it, expectations go up. And you can see as it broke the line, it tested it, and guess what? It came right back down, okay? And it tested it again, it came back down. It tested it actually, it looks like a handful of times before it failed. And now all of a sudden you can see this downward direction. This is where people in day trading are probably shorting the stock, okay? So once they get the validation of the stock and it's closed below the VWAP and you can see that there's this downward trend, now you can see that they're probably shorting the stock down here, and then of course they get a validation here with this line that I use. Okay, now this line that I use is basically a moving average, and it's a quick moving average that basically tells me how the stock's doing based on a short performance time. So for example, this line here is per minute. Okay, so it's per minute, and it only aggregates over the last 9 minutes. So it tells you what's the general direction of the stock over the last few minutes. And obviously, if it's downward direction, we know it's being sold off. And then as we know, it's going up. So if you're getting into a stock, you can sell here and you can buy back down here. Okay. And again, because we're in below the V-Wap, we know that people are selling off the stock. You can see it came up here, it bounced, it hit it, and it fell down, right? And again, it looks like it tried again. So this line is really popular in trading, and I would say it's probably the biggest tool. Another tool that I like to use is the RSI. It's called the Relative Strength Index, and it's basically to tell you when a stock is selling off. So as you know, going back to Moderna, as it was selling off, we can see that the RSI was sort of, you see this blue line here. So anytime it falls below 30, it basically is a bearish signal. It's basically saying it's oversold. So a stock has been dumped, it's been oversold, they've gotten rid of it, and this is actually a good time if you're day trading it to look at potentially entering into a long trade, which means to actually buy it. So guess what happened? It hit the low, it hit the blue, went under 30, and as we can see here, people started buying up the stock again, right? So then guess what happens? As the stock gets bought up, then the RSI rises, right? And then it's more or less stays up. So when it's sort of in the middle, we don't know generally which direction the stock is going to go, if we should buy or sell. But if we're looking at buying a stock at a good discount, what we want to do is we want to buy it when we see that it's down here with the light blue. Now, when do we, and you can see here, here's another massive sell-off, right? That's when we want to buy the stock. And then guess what? It came right back up after it hit its RSI. And this was a pretty steep sell-off. And this is when they announced that they had lost a patent against Airbus on Thursday. So there was this patent news on Moderna, and it hurt the stock a lot. Okay, and then so then what people do is they sell it off and then they buy it back. Okay, as this thing goes up and the RSI gets above 70, now it tells us that it's very bullish and that it's been potentially overbought. Now, what does overbought mean? It means that the stock is so popular, so hot right now that if you're thinking about entering, just be aware that there's a good chance that this thing's going to start to sell off so that it can start to come down to sort of what we call the neutral zone, right? Probably around 50. So when you're here in the middle, it's consolidating and there's no general direction. When we're below 30, we know the stock is bearish and we can buy. And we know when the stock is above 70 and it's bullish, that we know that it's time to probably sell and take profits. Okay, so we'll talk about the different time frames and why I use that in probably some upcoming video. But the two indicators that I did want to mention was the V-Wap and the RSI index. There's a ton of YouTube content. Again, I don't sell any programs here on this channel. This is a channel to help aspiring entrepreneurs grow. So if you're interested in learning more about the V-Wap or the RSI, I definitely encourage you to research those symbols or those indicators more. But for our purposes today, just to understand the basics of how we use them. Anytime you want to add a study in Thinkorswim, you're just simply going to go here to studies, and we're just going to add a study, and all these studies are here. So for the example, for the RSI, you can go to, let's see, all studies, and we can go to the R, and we can see right here, let's see, relative strength index. Where are we? Relative strength. RSI, there it is. So RSI is right here, and simply you can add it, and I use the default for that and the V-Wap. You can change the appearance if you don't like the colors or anything like that, but more or less they're here. And then the same thing with the V-Wap. The V-Wap is right there as well under the V-Wap right there. Okay, so those are the two studies that I'd recommend using if you are day trading. And like I said, if there's any questions, comments, things that you'd like to learn more about with stock trading, like I said, there's a ton of good content out there. I don't want to have to repeat things that I know that are already out there and useful and helpful. But if there's certain things that you'd like to talk about and you want to learn about with stock trading, feel free to leave a comment and we'll talk about it. All right, guys, well, that's all for now. Thanks for taking your time and watching this video. Like I said, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.